Hi, this is Jimmy from Lighthouse Germany Media Evolution Movement. Every war begins with a lie. To end the wars, we need to stop the lies. The independence of journalism is the key to peace and truth. And the family of mankind has to stand up for peace and truth. We need to form an alliance, such as humanityforpeace.net. Join us on humanityforpeace.net. We will organize worldwide actions and rallies on the 6th of August, the day of Hiroshima. We want to raise our voices worldwide in every country, in every nation of the world, to raise our voices against war and nuclear escalation. Join us on humanityforpeace.net. We have only one planet, and we will stand up for it.
This Sunday, August 6th, there will be an important peace rally held in New York at the Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza near the United Nations from 1 to 4 p.m. The rally, called Humanity for Peace, is hosted by a coalition of 20 sponsoring organizations, literally ranging all the way from communists on the one hand to libertarians like me on the other, but none of whom are affiliated with the Democratic or Republican parties, and most of whom have absolutely nothing to do with each other than a recognition that the nations of the world are heading in a dangerous direction in terms of the use of military power. I hope you'll join me there. I'll be addressing both the flaws in American policy as well as a path forward to peace and prosperity. After all, it's our government. Shouldn't its policies reflect our values and our interests?
Hi, everybody. It's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. here, and I want to thank all of the organizers at Humanity for Peace for putting this conference together and for giving me the opportunity to address you. My uncle, John F. Kennedy, once told one of his two closest friends, Ben Bradley, who was the editor of the Washington Post, when Bradley asked him, "What do you want on your gravestone as your epitaph?" My uncle told him he kept the peace. And when Bradley questioned him on that further and pressed him, my Uncle Jack said that the primary job of a president of the United States is to keep the country out of war. And he succeeded in doing that during his 3 years in office. He never sent a combat soldier abroad to die. He kept the country out of Laos. He kept us out of Cuba on 2 occasions. He kept us out of Berlin in 1961, and he kept us out of Vietnam. He sent only 16,000 military advisors there, mainly Green Berets, and on October 22nd, they didn't have permission to fight, although some of them did. And in October of 1962, he learned that one of his Green Berets had died, and he asked his aide to give him a combat casualty list, and the aide came back and said 75 had died so far. He said, "That's too many." And that afternoon he signed National Security Order 263, ordering all 16,000 troops home, with the first 1,000 coming home beginning at the end of November. And of course, a month after that, right at the end of November, he was killed, and a week later, President Johnson remanded that order. Within a year, Johnson had sent the 250,000 troops that the military had wanted from the beginning. But my uncle understood one thing about war, and it's something we need to understand today. Because today we're closer to a nuclear exchange than at any time since the Cuban Missile Crisis in October of 1962. My uncle understood that if you want to keep the country out of war, you have to be able to put yourself into the shoes of your adversary. When he came into office, the intelligence agencies and the people around him knew almost nothing about Nikita Khrushchev. President Eisenhower had said that it wouldn't be a soldier, a president who had started out as a soldier who would put Americans into World War III. Because the soldiers knew about it. He was a soldier himself. My uncle had been a soldier, was the only president to win the Purple Heart. And Khrushchev, of course, was a soldier and had been in the most brutal battle of World War II in Stalingrad. But the CIA knew almost nothing about him because there was a mole in Langley, and all of the people who had, all of the Kremlin officials who had defected to the United States or who had tried to work as spies for the United States were immediately detected. So the CIA knew almost nothing about Khrushchev, and they assumed that everybody in the Kremlin was a monolith. And my uncle felt disabled by that lack of knowledge. And in 1961, he started out his relationship with Khrushchev on a rocky road. They met in Vienna, and he found Khrushchev was pugnacious and bombastic, and had practically dared my uncle to go to war with him. My uncle quickly understood that he himself was surrounded by military war hawks and the intelligence apparatus and the military brass at the Pentagon, who saw a nuclear exchange with Russia as not only unavoidable, but also desirable. When they made a proposition to my uncle to go to war on several occasions, they said that we were going to win that war because we had more missiles than the Russians, which we do not have today. They have 1,000 more than us. But his brass told him that there would be only 30 million American casualties and 130 million Russians, and that would be victory. And my uncle left that meeting saying, and we call ourselves the human race. He knew that he had to. In 1961, in August, there was a confrontation in the Berlin Wall where U.S. tanks were facing down Russian tanks at Checkpoint Charlie. And the world was this close to nuclear war at that point. And my uncle made a back channel cable to Khrushchev, asking him to pull out his tanks. Khrushchev sent a note back to my uncle Cable saying, "My back is to the wall, I have no place to retreat." And my uncle realized at that point that Khrushchev was in the same position that he was. He was also surrounded by military war hawks who were egging for a fight with the United States. And they realized that only the two of them were going to prevent that full-blown nuclear exchange. My uncle made a promise to him that if Khrushchev withdrew his tank battalion, that my uncle would follow within a few hours. And they did that, and afterwards they trusted each other, and they realized they had to communicate directly with each other. They began a series of 26 letters that they exchanged with each other, highly personal letters that were smuggled by a Soviet GRU spy named Georgy Bolshakov, and run their own State Department, their diplomatic corps, their military and intelligence apparatus. So they were talking directly to each other. They also installed hotlines at Cape Cod, where I live, and those wires are still protruding out of the home of the summer lighthouse, which my brother now owns, and another hotline at the White House, where they could pick up the phone and talk directly to each other. And that's more important today than it ever was. Today we're in a very analogous situation where we are putting Vladimir Putin in a place where his back is against the wall. And it's a time more than ever that we need to be talking to each other. We have made no effort to talk to the Russian leadership for many, many months, almost a year. And there have been many efforts by the Russian leadership to engage us and engage Ukraine in peace negotiations, and we have rebuffed those. In April of 2022, the Russians, and we now know the Russians and the Ukrainians initial peace agreement that was based upon the Minsk Accords, and the Russians were already beginning to withdraw their troops. And yet we sent, the U.S. White House sent Boris Johnson over there to torpedo that deal. We need to be doing the opposite of that. We need to be talking directly with Vladimir Putin and all sides, and we need to settle this insanity before we initiate another nuclear exchange that would destroy all of humanity. So I want to thank you for all the work that you're doing, and I want to congratulate you and send you all my gratitude for making this a priority for all of humanity. Thank you very much.
Brothers and sisters, we gather today as the world stares into the abyss of nuclear winter. That long freeze that follows the raging fire of humanity's last war. A cold and dead world, all that remains of a once lush oasis in the vast emptiness of space. We gather because we stand on the precipice of that future, a new ice age of our own making, where the ash of humanity blocks out the sun, where the oceans freeze and the crops perish, where the lights flicker and fade, where famine and plague kill all who survived the blasts, the sudden extinction of almost all life on Earth. The war machine in the West would sooner see the world burn than share its abundant resources. But my spirit calls out in rebellion against the forces of annihilation. My spirit calls out for all who suffer from this war and the countless future generations whose lives hang in the balance. My spirit calls out alongside millions who refuse to accept a destiny ridden by the most violent among us. We refuse to accept the fate that they have ordained. So long as we draw breath, we will not allow the life of this world to be extinguished.
I'm Senator Dick Black, retired. I'm a retired colonel also. I was wounded in fierce fighting with the 1st Marine Division in Vietnam. I'm worried about the reckless and heartless foreign policy this nation is following. I encourage you to attend the Humanity for Peace rally in Manhattan, New York on August the 6th from 1 to 4 p.m. At this moment, no other nation on earth has become more warlike, more aggressive, or militaristic than our own. We've launched unprovoked wars against Serbia, Iraq, Libya, Syria, and Yemen. They did nothing to hurt us, yet we sent troops across the globe and killed millions of them. In 2014, we overthrew the government of Ukraine and installed a puppet regime of our own. Then 2 months after the war started, we blocked peace talks that had almost ended the war with very minimum bloodshed. We pushed Ukraine into a hopeless war that's turning them into a nation of widows and orphans. We're imposing a one world government through brutal force. And who profits? The global oligarchs, the kings, the princes, celebrities, bankers, media moguls, and the sons of influential politicians. They all gather at secretive conferences, places like Davos, Switzerland, to decide just how to enrich themselves at the expense of the voiceless mass of humanity. But we've had enough of this. If you'd like to strike back, join the peace demonstration at the United Nations Plaza on August the 6th. With your help, we can turn this around. So do it for the cause of peace and for the future of humanity.
The 6th of August marks the unnecessary bombing of Hiroshima. The reason why it's unnecessary is because the US dropped bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and even though the Japanese knew that they were being nuked, they still continued fighting until the Soviet Union ended the war. This historic example shows us that nuclear weapons are not a way of solving conflicts, but it is diplomacy which solves conflicts. We, as the Workers' and Family Business Party, BKP, think that it is fantastic that American groups are coming together and organizing against this big threat of a third world war, which would be nuclear. We stand with you against the ruling class, pushing for war and destruction in order to exploit the working class. Everyone who is against a third world war should join the protest on August 6th, because we are humanity for peace.